Hello, hello, hello. My name is Ragan Thomson. Today, we are going to explore the topic of the awakening experience. We are going to take a deep dive into this topic with our guest, Forrest Leichtberg, the founder of the Consciousness Network, a network designed to provide authentic ways to help connect people for the purpose of elevating their lives through health, business, and conscious relationships. But before we begin, let's start with some questions for our listeners. What is spiritual awakening? How do you know when you are truly beginning to wake up? Is there various stages to the awakening process? What's some of the symptoms of the awakening process? Is awakening a process that takes time, effort, and discipline? How worth it is it to fully awaken, and what are some of the benefits of doing so? At the tender age of 17, Forrest, barely out of high school, found himself fighting for his life in a surgical suite, and if he survived, facing an arduous multi-year recovery process. Flash forward to 2018, and we find that 26-year-old Forrest not only survived, he is now living out his dream of giving back to the world and gave him a second chance. He found his purpose as a Santa Barbara-based entrepreneur, running the Consciousness Network, a growing networking and event organization with a mission to help people share their knowledge and power and growth potential for the betterment of humanity. So thank you so much, Forrest, for coming today for this podcast with me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I feel the same way. Thank you, Ragan.
I was really looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. Likewise.
Forrest and I have been in each other's lives for, I'm wondering how many...
Gosh, 3 years? 3 or 4
now?
years?
Yeah, 3-4 years.
Somewhere around that.
Yeah. And I love this topic because first off, my own experience with the awakening experience has been profound. And I've known you for these years and I've watched you go through quite an experience of awakening. I think just even being in your life as your friend, and here we are in Santa Barbara doing our best to bring forth as much light as we can through the ways that we do, and bringing forth growth and the ability to get into whatever kind of workshops or get connected with whatever people that they would like to have in their life to help them move forward in their lives in a conscious, more healthy way. I think we both have that in common. So this has been really fun to be a part of each other's lives in this way, and just watch our own being changed through the experience, I think, of bringing that, the work that we bring to the community. I've watched us both change and grow. So it's exciting for me to bring this topic, the awakening experience, to today to us. For me, I wanted to bring it forward because I think there's so many people on the planet that are going through an awakening experience right now, more than ever before. Right. And I think that I know for sure before, I've been doing this work for almost 20 years. And I still remember the first conscious company I started, I guess now it's been about a decade ago. And this company was called In the Loving. And I remember the receptivity that was there was so much different than it is now. I think it's a lot of fun as a teacher and a healer now to just be on the world sharing about this work, because now there's those out there saying, wow, I've heard about that, or I'm a part of something like that, or I want to be a part of something like that. What's available? And there's so much more available for their growth and evolution as a soul on this planet. And that being said, we're talking today about the awakening process. So for me, watching myself wake up before was not as easy as it is now, is what I'm trying to say, right? I remember when I was a child, there was so little understanding of who I was, because there was this really bright light child that came into their environment, and they were, I think, just overstimulated in some way by me. I really think that, I came in to kind of rock the boat inside that family. And I sure did, because I think that my energy and my really truly coming in so awake and like I said, with this high level of energy, was a little intense for everyone. There was like wow, you're so emotional, you're so intense, you're so sensitive, you have, just way too much energy. We need to do something with this energy. So therefore led into my career of sports, which led into what I would say kind of going asleep again. And so therefore, after that, kind of moving into this kind of masculine environment, I began to fall asleep, right? And I think we all have our story in that regard. So I want to hear a little bit more about your story of what you feel the awakening process has been about for you and your life and your history. I just gave you a short glimpse of mine. I'm so curious about your story in regards to the topic.
My story, and thank you for asking. My story, really, my spiritual journey began about 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. And I was just a teenager in high school, 9th or 10th grade. And I found myself being fascinated with meditation and psychic phenomena and different books by, there was a book called Ishmael. I forgot the author's name, but people like Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williams, and I used to read their books. And it was fascinating to me. And then I found Eckhart Tolle. And so it was for the first time, my world opened up to these ideas. And then what happened is I was struck with an illness. And this illness was so painful for 4 to 5 years that I felt that it was either I was going to discover a way to navigate through that and come out the other end stronger than before and healed, or I just felt like I didn't have a choice other than that. And so what I didn't realize at the time, that I was in so much pain, was the incredibly beautiful value that was contained in that experience. And to me, the spiritual awakening process has a lot to do with the values that we awaken to. And it seems like those values across all the major world's spiritual traditions, you find some of the same values: compassion, awareness, and growth, service, community, these more spiritual values. So I think that the awakening process, at least in my own worldview and the way that I've experienced it, has been the awakening to these values into the way that I conduct my life, into the way that I conduct my daily life. So am I being kind? And am I being compassionate? Am I being thoughtful? Am I growing in awareness? Am I pursuing my own personal growth? Am I keeping in mind not just my own needs, but extending my care and my love and care to those around me? And to me, that experience of having that illness, what it did was it forced me to face the reality of mortality at an age that most people in our culture don't face or think about much. And so facing mortality brought forth the questions of what's really going to make my life most meaningful. And, because it's like, how long do I really have? How long does my family have? How long do the people I love really have? The greatest awakening that I experienced in my life, at least one of them, was rooted in that experience of facing mortality from this illness. And although, one might look at an experience like that and say, that's so bad, that's so horrible, that, I don't look at it like that anymore. It's looking back in hindsight 2020. It only is seen, I only see it as a gift. But see, I think each person has a choice to make, whether experiences like that and others, whether they'll use that to fuel their own awakening, to fuel their own deepening process, or if they're going to fall into a victim mindset and let it reduce their experience of life to something that doesn't feel very joyful. So I think we all face that choice. And so for me, becoming more conscious, becoming more spiritual is about infusing our daily decision-making and choice making with these values.
Powerful. And what a courageous choice that you made to decide to live is what I'm also hearing, right? Like you said there really wasn't another choice. Actually, there was, as far as I can see, there was another choice, which was to probably be sick and possibly die.
That was the other choice. I didn't say it.
And so I know you didn't say it, and I heard it. So it takes great courage. And I felt the same way at that young age of 15 when I was very sick as well, and was sick with an eating disorder, right? And that level of self-deprecation, self-abuse, self-persecution, self-doubt, which so many humans on this planet are dealing with, can lead to whatever it leads with. That might happen to manifest into a very serious eating disorder with anorexia and bulimia. Other disorders exist, right? Other addictions exist. Other habits exist that are unserving. Let's just put it in a mild, positive way, right? And they're so prominent on the planet right now. So I guess where I'm leading to is this, to our listeners, to let them know, just as I decided one day to say, I want to live. I think that's just it's will, right? It's the human will. And everyone has human will. Everyone has that choice to make. And when we talk about awakening, I think a lot of people, are like, what does that even mean? What does it mean to spiritually awaken? And here we are giving our stories. And I would like to just kind of dive in a little bit more what that really means, right? Because I really think there's a lot of these terminology is being thrown around on the planet. And some people really just don't know what you're talking about, right? And so we might be having listeners today that have experienced a high level awakening already, or are just getting started, or haven't even begun the process. So in regards to spiritual awakening, what I saw is just like you're explaining, it was this being who we truly are and knowing who we are and feeling that lightness, that brightness, perhaps that is who we are, right? God in a body, it's amazing, right? Our true soul self, right? And in that place, we are unique, we're divine, we're an emanation of God, but there's like nothing lacking. And then you enter into this plane of existence on the human plane, and you're dealing with the environment, you're dealing with stress, you're dealing with people and their issues and their unresolved karma, and the media and magazines and TV and whatever strife, challenges that you experience with other people. And I believe those who are on a spiritual path typically have some higher level abilities that they may not even be aware of. And one of them could be to be extremely sensitive and empathic. And I don't know about you, I just absorbed my environment. It wasn't just my own unresolved material I brought into this life that helped me fall asleep again, which I didn't know how to work with because I didn't have a teacher. And that goes into one of our questions today, right? Like, how do we wake up anyways? If we want to wake up, how do I do that? Like, I'm so lost right now. I'm so stuck in my stuff. So I think I don't know, I didn't get into this with you yet, and I'll ask this question next, but I believe every illness doesn't just start at the illness. There's something that happened before that brought you there, right? And so there's, when someone says, well, I have this addiction or I have this problem, right? Where I'm feeling really depressed, or, now I'm on these antidepressants, which is, taking over the planet. There's energetic, issues within themselves that, they were dealing with that maybe way before that disorder, that illness, before that addiction took hold. And for me, there was just a lot of missed, basic needs that were to be met as a child, right? Just being heard, being seen, being listened to, being emotionally connected with, being understood, very essential, wonderful, basic needs of a child. And I certainly did not feel like I got all those met. And my parents did the best they could. So this is another very important note of this podcast today is we are not judging our parents here. It's just the truth is there was just some missed marks, if you will. And as a child, being extremely empathic and sensitive, which most of the children that I'm thinking of that have now become adults that are also struggling with an awakening process, most likely were like us in some way with that sensitivity and that emotional, need for more than they got, kind of, right? And I think without that being met, I know my primary specialty right now is inner child work because so many adults are walking around with, a trapped traumatized child inside them that has never grown up. And so therefore there's this kind of, not understanding oneself. Why am I still doing these same things? Why am I still acting the same way as I used to as a child? Here I am, wanting to move forward and be an adult and be strong and be wise and thrive in my money and thrive in my business. Why do I look around and other people are doing that, but I'm struggling with this? What's going on here? And so there lies that there could have been a time, just like, again, myself and yourself, that there was some sort of emotional trauma or buildup of this energy that caused the kind of going to sleep again, forgetting who we are, forgetting about our gifts, our skills, our amazingness, our uniqueness. And that, I believe, is what gets to come back online as we wake up, right? And so here you're talking about these beautiful values that you started to step into and realize. What another incredible gift of waking up, that we start to learn about our soul. And we start to learn about our soul's lessons, our soul's values. So these are some of the benefits, right, to waking up, and which I don't think we talk about that very much. And that how common it is for those to fall asleep in this planet, because it's not designed to keep us awake. As a parent, I have really been trying my very best. Number one, I said this just the other day to a teacher that I work with, a spiritual teacher. And I said, my greatest goal is to keep my children awake. That's it. Like literally, if they leave my house and go on to their next part of their journey, that if I could keep them awake, that would be the greatest gift I could give to my soul, to myself, to them. And that's it.
I think that's an amazing gift that you're giving your children. And certainly I know so many of us would have loved to experience that kind of childhood, in that these values and being awake is a part of the parenting process. So thank you for doing your part in raising part of the next generation to take the light that you've brought into the world in your own unique way and to pass it on to them. So
thank you. Mm-hmm. It's an undertaking and I'm doing my best.
I commend you, although I do not know what that's like quite yet.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and that being said, kind of reversing and that question, which is, do you feel like, so what I'm attempting to do is help our listeners to kind of connect with, were they awake? Did they fall asleep? Are they waking up again? Did they not ever fall asleep? Have they just been awake the whole time? I don't know. It's individual, unique experience that we're dealing with here. Do you feel like there was some energetics that were going on in your house, or do you remember what might have led to the illness? Anything emotional or that could have led to that illness?
Well, I feel that, one of my closest mentors for almost 10 years was a medical intuitive, and she was an attorney before she found her abilities as a medical intuitive. And her teachings, at the fundamental core of her teachings, are that behind physical symptoms, she teaches about the messages behind your physical symptoms, and that your physical symptoms have messages for you. So, for example, if you have some sort of disorder happening, physical disorder happening, that chances are, for most people, it would be rooted in some kind of emotional, mental, energetic imbalance. And even in the Eastern healing traditions, Chinese medicine, they view the beginning of illness as when it begins in the subtle body. They view the physical manifestation of that imbalance as a later stage in the manifestation of the imbalance. So let's say you have something show up in your physical body. According to Eastern healing traditions, that would be a part of a later stage of the problem. And so they're really viewing this in a more holistic sense, that what's the source and the root of these physical problems, and how can we address them before they become physical problems? So, it's a fascinating area. I felt, on the other hand, though, that I do believe that our spirits, God, our spirits, our soul, will give us certain experiences that we need to have for the evolution of our consciousness, for the evolution of our character, of our really to meet our life's purpose. And so for me, I hold the belief that my own unique physical challenges that occurred back when I was a teen were more related to my spirit saying, hey, Forrest, it's time to wake up to certain things, rather than being a direct result of an energetic imbalance. Now, I'm certain that I have experienced physical symptoms that have resulted in an inner imbalance, but I think that particular one, when I was young, I think that was meant to be there. I think it was set up. So, for people listening to this, the one thing that kept me going was the awareness that there was something greater or something beyond the current present circumstance. And even though it wasn't an intellectual awareness, it was more of an intuitive awareness. So if people can just gain, if you're listening to this and you feel like you're unhappy about your life in some way, if you can tap into some awareness that there's a possibility of transcending whatever area of your life, that there's a possibility there. I think that could be a first step for people. Just knowing or believing, having faith, and feeling into the light that's both beyond the present circumstance, but in some mysterious way also within it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's super. I connect with that very much because I do remember a part of my experience of coming out of my specific illness. There was something that I latched onto. I remember specifically throughout the entirety of that many years of being sick was that I just felt like there was so much to be hopeful for in my future. Like there was this, like, regardless of what I was dealing with, there was something inside me that could see outside of the illness and say, no, there's a lot to be hopeful for. There's a lot to be excited about. I have a lovely family. I just kept latching on to what was out here just to kind of give me that inspiration to keep going, even when there was days where I didn't want to keep going. And I think that's a really profound, important piece of this today, because I think that all humans are consistently seeking hope and meaning in life, right? And more than we know. I read this book, and it's another wonderful self-help book. I'm not going to give the title today. It's a lovely book. And it was all about that. It was all about how humans are consistently trying to seek hope and find meaning in life through interesting ways. Sometimes, an example was a man had lost his grandfather. He never met him. He lived somewhere clear across the world. And although he didn't know him, all of a sudden his grandfather, before he passed, was sick. And he said, you know what, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm going to travel across the globe and I'm going to start taking care of this grandfather I've never even met. And his dad was estranged from his father. And he said, I'm going to do it. And he ended up spending his next 5 years taking care of this grandfather he'd never met. And it became this powerful experience of trying to figure out why he even ended up here. Like, who is this man? And he helped his grandfather very much for those years. And it's just an example. He had so much meaning in that experience, right? And he didn't even know why he was there or what he was doing there. Yet he found so much meaning in this experience, and it taught him a lot about himself. So I think what I'm also hearing you say is for we as humans to, again, I think with will, finding that will within yourself to say, you know what, enough is enough. There is so much out there beyond what I'm feeling right now, because the ego, let's just be honest, is extremely self-centered. I mean, it's just me, my, I, right? It's like all day long. If you could just, I want this, I need this, I have this, right? It's just constantly saying these messages and acquire more, and I need more, and I want people to like me. And we all have an ego till we don't, right? And so I believe that the ego is consistently, until we transcend it, is trying to get us to be very self-centered, right? And so I think with enough self-centeredness, as we know, as we see on the planet, someone eventually can go to sleep. It's not a light place to be in, to not see outside yourself and think globally or think about other people, and clearly from your awakening process, as you've shared, that became so primary for you. You could feel it. You wanted to serve humanity. And that is something I love about you. I know that about you. And I believe that is a part of the awakening process. You become very selfless. And I remember another, something I said once I started to get well is I just was so excited to live life to the fullest. I was like, I need to have experiences. I felt like all those years were kind of a little bit lost, which is not true. But at the moment, that I felt there was a waste of time. I was like, wow, there were so many years where I was just depressed and supposedly light, right? Out there, I am good. I'm fine. How many of us try to put on a happy face when we're actually, internally struggling? And I said nothing. No, I can't even pretend like I'm not struggling now. I'm obviously struggling and coming out of that struggle with myself really more than anything. And for you, I understand you're saying that you were presented perhaps the illness to help you wake up more. And that does happen. I mean, that absolutely can happen. And for me, it kind of led into the illness, right? There was a lot of mismarkers, and I believe there's a lot of karma I was working through and, different facets. And then there was this getting well period. And I just remember I was just like, wow, I want to help the world. I want to go do things. I want to be what another cool, wonderful part of waking up unto oneself again, whatever you are unique to you as a soul, that will come online again. And so I'm curious, if you want to provide to our listeners today, any kind of ideas or possibly strategies or anything that's helped you, or perhaps you'd like to present today to our listeners as ways to help them move into a state of awakening.
Sure. Well, first I want to acknowledge something you said earlier about the ego, me. In Tibetan Buddhism, I've done a fair amount of studying of Tibetan Buddhism. One of the core premises in Tibetan Buddhism that I learned is that the cause of suffering is that part of the mind that human beings have to say, what's me, what's in it for me. So the secret that they teach is to turn that inside out, right? To flip it around and start asking, well, what's in it for them, or what's in it for us, right? So I think just the practice of that is very helpful. I spent some time last year in New York City, and having grown up in Southern California, I knew my life here well, but sometimes it takes an experience of contrast to appreciate something more, or to wake up to the reality of something in our world that you never would have before. And so going there, I saw, of course, there's magnificence and there's affluence, and then there's also the people on the subways begging for 1 penny at a time. And when I saw that during my time there, I spent a few months there, I realized, wow, people can really use my help. People can use your help. People can use the help of any of us. And so the need was more apparent. Here in Southern California, at least where we live, you sort of have to most people have to look for that kind of suffering. But in a place like New York City, you can just see it almost everywhere you go. And it was very valuable because it was like, wow, there are other people who will actually benefit from what I have to give. And that I didn't quite recognize that I have something to give until I went there and saw the need clearly. And so I think that it can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking that hey, what can I give? What do I have? What gifts do I have to share? And I think, the fact is that there's room for everybody's gifts to come into service in this world. So that's one way, I think, is just service, a commitment to service, and realizing that there is a need that you can fill and help fill in a beautiful way and in a meaningful way, and in a way that the other person on the receiving end will find value in, or even a miracle in. So that's one way, I think, is to serve. And then, of course, there's practices. Self-discipline is one of those core values that's found across spiritual traditions. So self-discipline, applying it to this practice of being of service, but also practices like meditation and mindfulness and volunteering your time for the homeless shelter or for a nonprofit charity, giving money, being charitable. And so these practices any practice that helps us become more well, that helps us thrive, whether it's your diet, your exercise routines, meditation, service to others, getting some sunlight, the more we can thrive, the more we can serve. I think the more capacity we have to serve and the more capacity we have to find a meaningful experience of life. So self-care, really self-love, self-care through practices and self-discipline is really important.
In regards to what you said, Forrest, I just really feel this kind of full circle for where we began, which is this idea that the awakening process, from what I'm getting from our conversation, is so much about finding what it is in this life that brings meaning to your life and lights you up, right? It feels really good to give. It really does. It also feels really good to receive. And it really is meant to be a reciprocal experience. I do believe, though, as we give and as we receive and we continue to do that beautiful dance, that it's like we're filling up our tank. Is that there's this internal vessel, right, that we have. And it's like a tank. It just gets more and more full. And so that being said, someone will say, oh, I don't know where to begin. Where do I, what teacher, what structure, what strategy, what holistic program, what meditation should I do? Like, just start somewhere. Just start adding in a discipline that works for you. And I think that's something really important for our listeners, because I think there is now a lot of options. And just to, I remember back in the day, I wanted to explore getting into a charity and serving. And it was one of the best things I've ever done. I'm still working with this charity in LA, and it's been so life-changing. And all I did was listen and look, and I found it. And here I am, 10 years later, still working on the board of the charity and volunteering. One of the most amazing things I've done in this life. So I completely agree with you. And just my last point here is to our listeners is just to research. We have an incredible amount of information at our fingertips, and, obviously on Google. That's one way. And then just start something, and try something and watch yourself begin to shine and wake up and feel better and better. And it's quite possible for all of us. So thank you so much, Forrest. Thank you very much. What a pleasure being with you here today. Yeah, this was awesome. And I really care about you and love you. And I'm just so happy that you're doing the work that you're doing, and look forward to hearing about it more. I would like to offer you an opportunity right now to share anything about what you're up to, what's going on in your life, what you want to share with the listeners right now, so they know more about what's happening in the world of Forrest Leichtberg.
Sure. Well, thank you. My main focus right now is this nonprofit organization that I'm running called the Consciousness Network, which its premise is that for a more awakened world, the constituency of the world has to awaken. The more awake the constituency of the world is, the more healthy the world will be. And so it's a consciousness network based in Santa Barbara. And so if you want to learn more about ongoing programming, speakers like, we did a collaboration with Deva Premal in May, Jack Canfield in July, Katie Hendricks, Gay Hendricks, Dr. Dan Siegel, and a lot of other luminaries and authors and speakers. When you go to these events, you not only receive information and inspiration from the speakers, but it's really about connecting with a community of others who are in their awakening journey, in their awakening process. So these values that you're learning about are being reinforced by a whole community of hundreds of people. And so feel free to learn more at thecn.org, thecn.org. And you can sign up for mailing lists and get all sorts of updates. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another wonderful way to wake up, right? Joining in community. Absolutely. So you feel that support and that synergy and just feel Yeah, just that you're not doing it alone.
Absolutely.
So powerful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Wonderful. Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by the Consciousness Network. The Consciousness Network's mission is to establish, promote, and advance conscious communities. It contributes to local and global well-being through its ongoing programs, which serve as meeting spaces, training grounds, resource pools, and a support network to help the Santa Barbara and Southern California community fulfill its potential and impact the world. The Consciousness Network strengthens the bonds between all of us, creating relationships through which true healing, service, and transformation can take place. For more information and to sign up, the Consciousness Network may be contacted at www.consciousnessnetwork.org. So if you enjoyed being with us on this podcast today, I would really love it if you join me on my website. It's raganthomson.com. And on my website, you'll find any upcoming events. If you prefer to get into an event, there's even a place that you can buy your tickets for the event, as well as testimonials you can check out there, as well as audios and podcasts. This is all free on my website. I have been hearing repeatedly from people, not only and locally and around the world, that they're getting a lot of benefit out of hearing the audios, which are offering wonderful healing techniques for you to bring into your life. So I hope that you also join me and partake in these free offerings. If you can follow me on social media at Ragan_Thomson, that would be so wonderful. So thank you so much to all my listeners today. I am truly grateful to have gotten to spend this time with you. It really is such a pleasure, a privilege. It's an honor to serve in this way. Hopefully this conversation has helped you in ways that are going to be extremely beneficial for you in your life, to help you further deepen in your awakening process. Perhaps it's the beginning of your awakening process. If that is to be so, I am so excited for you, because what's in store for you is a much more peaceful, joyful, loving, and authentic life. That's what's available for you, just as it is for me, as it is for Forrest. This is what's available for all of us. And the more that we do this, the more that we choose to wake up, we are not only giving this as a gift unto ourself, our soul, but we're gifting all of humanity. And that is what I believe to be true, is why we are here. So thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Blessings.